Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, along with my producer, Lindsay, and we are streaming from downtown Bellevue, Washington today. Today, we have on the show Lorraine Lanning. You do not want to miss it. She has an inspiring story of her 70 pounds of weight loss on keto and how she also recovered from COVID. And since COVID is in the news so much, I want to start with that. So, Lorraine, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit and explain your experience with COVID and how you recovered from it.
Oh my gosh. Well, hi, Lorraine Lanning. I live in Colorado. I have 3 adult kids and 3 young grandkids. And COVID, yes. Well, having already been tuned into health and nutrition because of keto, weight loss, and all that for a number of years while I'm on Twitter, I was in a good spot for learning all the ins and outs of COVID and viruses and what to do. And so early on, we started taking prophylactics. I was already looking into it before that because I had gotten bronchitis a couple times the year before and didn't want to do that ever again. So I'm like, okay, what's up? I'm keto, I'm healthy, I'm active. Why do I get this stupid bronchitis? And I had started out with zinc, and then COVID came along, and everybody's like, hydroxychloroquine works really good as a prophylactic, but hard to get, got demonized. So started taking quercetin and added, we were already doing vitamin D, magnesium, things like that. Added in some other things along the way, vitamin C, which was funny because you had heard for years that, oh, vitamin C doesn't really work against viruses, because for a while people thought that would work, and then, oh no, it doesn't. Well, here it is again, vitamin C works. So started taking that, read about NAC. Sometime around July, heard about Ivermectin, but didn't take it as a prophylactic. So we've been taking all of that since end of February, early March. So comes Thanksgiving, and my husband got symptoms first. I have no contact with anybody usually except for my immediate family. Hadn't had any contact for anybody in 2 weeks, but my husband goes to work every day. So he comes down with symptoms. 12 hours later, I start to come down with symptoms. Chills, body aches, no fever, surprisingly, with chills and body aches. Not sure how that works. But after about 3 days, we felt better, like all the way better. So I'm like, oh, good, we beat it. All those prophylactics worked. Well, the next day, day 4, I guess it would be, started getting mild cold symptoms, like upper respiratory, normal mild cold symptoms. I'm like, well, that's a drag, but no big deal, not very sick. Then things kind of kept going, got a mild cough, certainly nothing along the lines of bronchitis, really barely sick overall, very mild. I'm like, well, okay. So we get to the end of the week, and all of a sudden I realized I had no taste and no smell. You're down to your basics, your sweet, salty, sour, bitter, but no flavor. It's very odd. And I'm like, uh-oh. So now we're more sick. Should have taken the ivermectin a week ago, but it was so mild. We were kind of, it's like, yeah, we don't need anything else. It's just very mild. So took the ivermectin, and my husband completely over everything within 3 days. I, however, was not. So then I'm like, well, uh-oh. So I did the speak with an MD, telemedicine, and got the HCQ and Zithromax. The bad part about that is it takes a day or 2 to get the appointment, and then it takes a while to get it shipped from the pharmacy in Florida. So since the pharmacy got the prescription on a Friday and UPS doesn't ship on the weekend, I didn't get it for 4 more days. So I got all that on Monday and took it. It's you take it for a week, for 5 days, and that pretty much killed it. And I really, knowing more about how the virus is only replicating during the first week, I really don't know that it was the HCQ that did it that last week for me. I think it was the antibiotics. And I definitely had something going on in my lungs. The cough, plus I could just feel it. And so I think it was the Zithromax that finally killed the end of it there. And then everything's fine since then. It's funny, my prescription bottle actually said on it, take for 5 days and then take once a week. The HCQ, take once a week until the pandemic is over. I thought that was very humorous to put on a prescription bottle, but yeah, so that was our experience.
That is interesting. So are you still taking it prophylactically once a week?
No, I saved the other 10 days worth because we were better, so I didn't take that. And it's nice to know I have it on hand. We have the ivermectin on hand. And I will confess, we couldn't get a prescription for the ivermectin, so we got the horse paste from Amazon. Because there's a great doctor from, I believe it's Peru, another Twitter account shared his information, and he had the entire dosage chart for pills and the horse paste, and I think another, that might have been a liquid or something, I'm not sure. He had the whole chart, and it's weight-based, how much you take, and so we took that, and it's not too bad, although with no sense of taste. It's just bitter is what it is, but it's a teeny tiny amount. It's nothing to gag over. So we just took that and it works very well. And really the only difference is that it's less refined than the human pills. So I don't see that it's a big deal. A lot of countries in the world don't have
go ahead, Lorraine.
A lot of countries in the world don't have the luxury of our expensive medicine and healthcare and everything. So they take what works, and it works. So that's what we had.
And ivermectin is been around for years. In fact, when this whole pandemic came out, and back in the spring when they were talking about it, I had never heard about it for human use. The only use I had ever heard about it for was as a compounding pharmacy at Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy. We had compounded up ivermectin for veterinary use. Specifically, we had made it up for some dogs that had mange because it's a good anti-parasite. So I haven't done a lot more research on it since then, but there's been a lot more research done, regarding the treatment of COVID. And I think that some doctors are using it prophylactically with great results.
Yes.
And just to get this out there, we are not recommending self-treatment necessarily and going down to a veterinary store and buying ivermectin. I appreciate your freedoms and what you did, Lorraine. I just want to make that clear to our viewers and listeners that we don't promote that. We want to make sure that you're going through the proper channels. And if you do need, I do know some doctors that do prescribe it. So if you do need a doctor to prescribe it, if the listeners and viewers are interested, I can, get a hold of me and I can send you their number. So thank you for that story. Now you seem to think that your husband brought it home because you stay home most of the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Does your husband wear a mask at work?
He does wear a mask at work. They have done temperatures and masks and all of that since the beginning because they're considered essential. I think everybody's job's essential.
Absolutely.
And no one at work had any symptoms. So knowing that you normally don't catch a virus unless you're in close contact for an extended time with someone with symptoms, actually coughing and things like that, you don't normally catch a virus. So nobody at his work was sick. Nobody had symptoms. So who knows where we got it. I seen enough that I know masks don't work. And maybe if you wear an N95 that's properly fitted, you can cut your exposure down by quite a bit. But this whole cloth mask thing, the loose masks that people wear and they pull them under their noses and take them on and off and touch them all the time, no way. But we don't know. Nobody we were around was sick. So it's just mystery. There is one scientist that I follow, I think he's in the UK, has some interesting theories on seasonality and things like people who live in the tropics still get, we all think of seasonality as, when it's warm and the sun is shining, viruses go away. Well, where do they go? They don't actually go away. People in the tropics where it's warm and sunny all the time still get them. I think it's more associated with their wet season in that respect. But I have an unscientific theory that we carry them with us all the time, and something happens to lower our immunity either cold or stress, lack of sleep, something like that, and it gives them a chance to infect us and make us sick.
Well, I think that's a good theory. I mean, I literally viruses are, at least an airborne virus like that, it's almost ubiquitous. I mean, it's everywhere. But sometimes it's not pathogenic. Why is it not pathogenic to some and it is to others? Probably what you're talking about, their immune system, and it could be viral load. Every once in a while you do hear about a healthy person that gets COVID-19 and they don't have any underlying health conditions and they're young, but then you start looking more into it and, they were an ER doctor and they treated, in the initial pandemic, they treated 50 patients in one day that had COVID. Well, their viral load was huge. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised that they got sick. And this is really nothing new. We've been dealing with viruses for thousands of years. Yeah. Smallpox, which I think most people would agree is probably more dangerous than COVID. Mm-hmm. And yet there were some people that would not, in a family, some people would get infected and some people wouldn't. Some people would have more severe symptoms and some people wouldn't. And why is that? I think, probably immune system issues, but there's a lot of things we don't know about it, but we definitely didn't stop the world because of it. And, my thought is too, with this is like, the vaccine was supposed to be the savior of this COVID. And then we're going to be able to change our lives again because the vaccine, well, that doesn't seem, in my opinion, to be happening because people that are getting the vaccine are still having to wear a mask and they don't know for how long they're immune, if they are immune, and they don't know if they can still spread it. So,
and they get it a week later.
Sometimes, there has to be a point where we have to start making some serious decisions as people and as a government when we're going to move on from this. It's because we can't let it keep destroying our lives and businesses. So. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story. Go ahead, Lorraine.
It's gone on so long now that people are truly brainwashed with the fear of all of it. And there's, I don't know, maybe it's part of the education system, but very few people seem to have basic knowledge of biology and viruses and bacteria and things like that. And so they're easily overcome with fear over this from what they hear in the media. And unfortunately, it's all been politicized, which doesn't help at all.
No, it is so clear it's been politicized. I mean, a good way to just prove that it's been politicized, whether you're on the right or the left or you're in the middle look at how each state is dealing with it differently. That makes it pretty clear that it's been politicized, and the virus doesn't stop at state lines. The virus doesn't know where the state line is. So, but yet, Florida has been open for months and months now, and they seem to be dealing with it pretty well. So, California with some of the most draconian lockdown rules and mask rules, their case numbers really per 100,000 is not much different than Florida. No. And I think that has been shown over and over again. So
the curves are the same everywhere, no matter what measures they took. And actually, when you look at them, the places that lock down the hardest and use masks the most have more cases and more deaths. And perhaps, as most medical professionals should know, and a lot of people should know, is that the virus itself doesn't usually kill you. It's the secondary infections, the pneumonia. That's usually what older people die of in nursing homes and stuff. They don't die of the actual virus. The virus has done its thing in the first week. It's the pneumonia and other things that come after that are so deadly. And when you think of the way people don't wear masks appropriately, if you're wearing them for 8 or 10 hours a day, and most people aren't changing them and putting on a fresh one every time and all that, what else are they breathing in? Bacteria, little microfibers, the virus itself from the outside of the mask, maybe. If masks and all that worked, then you would think places like California would have a drastic reduction in cases and deaths, and they don't.
Right. Exactly. That's definitely something that we need to consider. And I haven't honestly been tracking the numbers a lot because I just don't know how much I trust the numbers anymore. So
no,
it's really hard.
Yes.
Yeah, the PCR test, I definitely don't trust that, and just the numbers I think have been trumped up because especially with deaths, because you see, you hear reports all the time, and I know personally people that have said, their mom died of cancer and they listed it as COVID.
Yep.
She was on hospice and listed COVID. I know personal stories like that, so I know that is happening. So,
Yeah, definitely.
So look, so Lorraine, tell us. So, how old are you, if you don't mind sharing?
I'm 58.
Awesome, good for you. And do you think so? A few years ago, you had a story of you went keto. That's kind of why you've just been doing a lot of research on health and wellness stuff. And just tell us about that journey and tell us how you think that might have, did that have any effect on how you were able to recover from COVID? So start with your keto story. I know you have a great story on that. So just start from the beginning.
Yeah, we've done keto/carnivore for over 7 years. I call September 5th my Alive Day because that's the day I started, 2013, and it completely transformed our lives, my husband and I. It just totally different. I was getting increasingly desperate for some relief. I had edema in my legs that was getting higher and higher, as they say. I was doing a lot of power walking and stair climbing in the middle of the day at work and stuff like that to find some relief because it was so uncomfortable. Doctors were no help. I actually had heart palpitations and went to the doctor. I wore a Holter monitor for 24 hours and went back and she said, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with you." I had no blood pressure issues or blood sugar issues or anything. Everything was fine. I knew I wasn't fine. I was having panic attacks. And you think panic attacks are psychological. They're actually, well, at least in my case, physical. So I was having all these increasing issues. I never had any successful weight loss. I did all of that extra exercise, power walking for an hour a day, never lost a single pound in a year. So I'm like, well, it must be my genetics. I'm meant to be fat and sick, right? That's what everybody tells you. That's what everybody thinks. So one day, I don't even know what blog it was. I was reading, somebody posted a video, and I think it was from the Today Show, actually, of a young woman. She was 28, and she had lost 88 pounds in a year. And I thought, oh my God, I didn't even know that was possible because normally they would tell you, oh, 1 pound a week, maybe 2 at the most, you could lose if you eat a lot of salad and do a lot of exercise. So how could anybody lose that much weight in a year? And so I was intrigued and I looked her up and she said, well, keto and resistance workouts. Ketogenic diet is high fat, moderate protein, very low carb. I'm like, oh, okay. So I did a little more research, very little, and found a bodybuilding forum. And they said, well, I don't remember, I think it's like 70% fat, 25%, these numbers might not work, 25% protein, 5% carbs. I'm like, oh, okay. So I started the very next day. I ate my PF Chang leftovers or something that night, and the next day started, and totally oblivious to anything else about it except those percentages. So I ate very strange things at first. I would have, I obsessively read nutrition labels, and I would have, I'd have like Wassa crackers with cream cheese and 10 raspberries and a Slim Fast shake for breakfast, for example. And I made a lot of low carb versions of carby things, breads and crackers and cookies and muffins and all that stuff at first, which is fine at first. And it worked. It worked eating that stuff. We started eating more eggs and more meat and things like that. But you're still stuck in that paradigm where your meal has to include a bread and a starch like potatoes and a vegetable and fruit and dessert and whatever. So I did low carb of all those things, but it was still all those things. I can't tell you how many low carb mud cakes we ate for dessert for the first couple of years. But then gradually I was, well, I'll back up a step. So I had that first week, had all these amazing results. All that water weight went away within days. 11 pounds the first week, all the edema gone. And I'm like, my God, how does that happen? So then that started all the research into why. Well, when you don't eat carbs, you have low levels of insulin, so your kidneys release all that water and take all the sodium with it, which is why most people get keto flu. It's really dehydration from lower levels of sodium. I never had keto flu. I don't know if I was just liberal with the salt or whatever, but I never had any of those symptoms. So I started doing all the research and looking at why did all the water weight go away? And then I started running into more real information about not just no sugar, but grains and seed oils, things like that. So I just gradually transitioned to meat plus green vegetables, basic diet. Still occasionally do things like fathead pizza, or I'll make fathead pastries for when we're going camping and we're on the road a lot. Something easy to eat in the car, that kind of thing. Did a lot of intermittent fasting. I mean, a natural way is just to extend your overnight fast to the middle of the day, so you have brunch instead of breakfast. We only eat twice a day generally. We'll eat brunch and then an early dinner, preferably. When we were traveling, we went to London for our 30th anniversary a year later after we started. And it was great. We ate once a day at 4 p.m, got our coffee in the morning, and lots more time for sightseeing, and felt great. That whole first year was just this year of firsts. I spent the first few months like this. Oh my God, my nose, my cheeks, my collarbone, it just felt so weird. Fitting in an airplane seat comfortably, where I could crossing my legs comfortably.
Wow.
Just all these miraculous things. Skin issues disappeared. Skin tags just disappeared. I had deep, painful cracks in my heels. There's lots of stuff out there. People with little sanders and disappeared. Dry, crackly elbows and stuff disappeared. I had my nails had these weird, deep scoops to them. Disappeared. What else? I made a list somewhere. The heart palpitations, completely gone. Panic attacks, completely gone. I have not had a headache of any kind in over 7 years, even with COVID, even with bronchitis. No headaches ever. And I used to have very bad ones. Maybe today they'd be diagnosed as migraines. They would make me nauseous at times. No headaches at all. I've very rarely taken ibuprofen in 7.5 years. Once for a muscle issue, and actually during COVID for a couple of days because the muscle aches were pretty bad. What else?
Well, and just let me just comment, if you don't mind. Just think about how many people are on medications for the things that you changed with your diet, and they're on medications chronically for the rest of their life, when in reality, they just need to change their diet. And unfortunately, most doctors don't talk to people about that. It's just like, oh, yeah. I mean, it's just like, oh, okay, well, you got headaches and you need this medication. It's like, well, your diet can affect that, for sure.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And I had no idea about any of it. I found out as I went and researched and everything, that MeatRx.com's a great place for lots and lots of stories of people who fixed various health issues by eating just meat. Or, keto has a lot of that too. And we have tried carnivore. We're actually more carnivore-like. We mostly eat meat and fish. We actually don't like chicken so much anymore. Pork, eggs, but we do have vegetables when we feel like it, and in season. Love fresh tomatoes in the summer, and we're spoiled by that, so we don't eat them in the winter because they just don't taste as good.
We're streaming his website right now. That's Dr. Shawn Baker. He has been on our He was on our podcast about a year ago.
Yeah, definitely. Even if you don't want to be carnivore long term, doing it for 30 days is definitely the best elimination diet if you're having issues. And then you can add things in one at a time to find out what bothers you. For example, I dearly love sweet potatoes. Not the Thanksgiving sweet potatoes with marshmallows. That's just disgusting. But savory sweet potatoes, I love them. they do not love me. They give me great GI issues, so I can no longer eat those. But red meat in particular, I think, is causes the least problems for everyone, unless you're misfortunate enough to get bitten by a tick in Texas that causes
A Lone Star
meat
tick.
allergy. Yeah. Oh, that would be terrible, because we eat a lot of red meat. So yeah, it's just been wonderful. We have so much more energy. We're active. Oh, and here another interesting thing: we live at altitude, and we've noticed that we can hike at a higher altitude, like the 13,000 feet, with no breathing issues.
Well, here's the thing I tell people. I mean, and you can see this. Thanks for sharing that, by the way. But you can see this in vegetarians and vegans. You can usually spot them right away because you can tell they have low iron stores. So speaking of being of altitude, there is no better way without getting an IV infusion of iron to increase your iron than red meat, period.
Right.
There is no supplement. There is no, without doing IV infusions, there's no better way to increase your iron. If you have low iron, red meat. And I just want to piggyback on the ultimate elimination diet. The carnivore diet, starting out with red meat only, is the ultimate elimination diet. And then, like you say, maybe slowly add things in, maybe sweet potatoes. They didn't work for you. You found that out. Well, think about if you didn't find that out.
Right.
You had GI issues. How many people go to the doctor with GI issues and they give them,
millions.
a proton pump inhibitor because you're having GI issues when you just need to stop eating sweet potatoes? I mean, let's fix the problem and not just treat the symptom.
Yes,
I mean, let's fix the problem.
And,
Let me back
frankly,
up too.
If you have a GI issue, it's almost
diet.
100% diet.
It's diet.
Yeah.
I see all these people on, like for IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. Everybody has irritable bowel syndrome now. And one of the reasons why is because there's a drug on the market that costs $4,000 a month that, everybody needs it. So kids are getting this drug. And it's, they diagnose it as IBS, which is basically some diagnosis, in my opinion, that it's just some kind of GI issue and they want to be able to treat it, so they call it IBS, and they build an insurance company for it and build a drug for it and all that. And when in reality, it's diet related. Probably. Yes. I would guess 99% of them plus are diet related. Yes. Any kind of GI issues are probably diet related. You're right. Constipation, diarrhea, IBS, reflux. They're diet problems. You don't need drugs.
Well, and along those lines, the constipation especially, why would you want to add more fiber to that? I mean, that's what causes that.
Right. And now there's a big argument about that. And I'm actually I'm with you, Lorraine, and I actually have a GI doctor on our podcast in a couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about that. And he's a big believer in the carnivore diet, and he's going to talk a little bit about fiber too. And of course, Shawn Baker is talking about that on our podcast also. So let me back up a little bit because I want to add some things to some very interesting things that you said. Carbohydrates and water. When you think about the definition of a carbohydrate means water.
Hydrate's water.
So I don't remember the exact amount, but I think for every 1 gram of carb, you hold 3 grams of water. It's either 3 or 4 grams, which makes sense. So, that's how part of the reason, and the sodium, I get that too. That's why when you are on carnivore diet or any low keto diet, that's why
add salt.
Nutrient mineral deficiency, mineral supplementation is probably pretty important with salt. Yeah.
Well, dehydration is not a lack of water. Usually it's a lack of salt.
Yeah. And water follows.
Well, yeah. So I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree. Another thing I wanted to comment on is, when you were eating, twice a day, when you were actually eating once a day, when you were traveling on vacation, you talked about how much more time you had to spend doing sightseeing. Yes. And I think that's one of the issues that we have is that we live to eat.
Yes.
And I love to celebrate with eating and, sit down with my wife and have a great dinner and all that. Don't get me wrong. Sure. But really eating is designed to keep us alive. It's not supposed to be something that we can do all the time, to extravagance. We're meant to just eat to stay alive. And I remind patients of that all the time. Don't eat to live. Just don't live to eat to live.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally all we're wired for is to, and if you think about us biologically, thousands of years ago, we weren't able to eat all we wanted every day.
No,
And
it was
literally
work
as
to eat.
Americans now, we can eat all we want every day.
Yes, all day.
And
well,
you're
that's
right.
what people do. If you watch the travel shows that we watch, most of them, everything revolves around meals and food. Either buying it, getting it, preparing it, eating it. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, 6 meals a day, ice cream and roasted marshmallows. And I mean, the one show we watch, I swear to God, every single time, every 10 minutes of the show, I'm hungry. We're supposed to be getting lunch, and you don't realize how much time you spend with all that. I know, especially at the beginning of keto, when I was making all that stuff, I spent hours cooking and baking and all that. And, one of the advantages, especially of carnivore, is your food prep is almost nothing. Your cook time is maybe 10 minutes and you have almost no dishes. So being the one who does the dishes, I prefer not to do all that and to have very few dishes. Especially when we're camping, I actually pre-make as much food as I can, either freeze it or have it in the fridge. And I make sure almost all of it is grilled because I don't want to spend any of my camping time cooking or prepping food or anything. I'll pre-make marinades and bring them in jars. And I do is so that in my week, I'm doing almost no cooking. I want to be out birding and hiking and whatever. I don't want to spend time doing that. It's a waste of life. So that was hugely eye-opening in London, that we just grab our coffee, get on the tube and go off. And then about 4, we'd go have some dinner. And I'm going to admit, we did try some dessert, sticky toffee pudding and fresh blackberry cheesecake. And then it wasn't so great on our plane ride home because
you weren't used to it.
We weren't used to it. And the ankles were swelling a little bit there. But it was all a big lesson for sure. But
diet affects so much, and carnivore, especially if you're doing pure carnivore, it simplifies so many things for sure. I wanted to backtrack way back when on your in your first keto, when you first started the keto journey. You talked about a little bit about keto breads and keto crackers and things like that, and I always like to comment on this because in 2013, keto is still pretty new.
Yeah.
Now we have an entire keto industry that has been developed, and
because it's expensive.
you can buy keto. You can buy keto bars, and you can drink ketos and ketones, and and I'm not completely against that. And I know that works for some people, and if that works for some people, then to lose weight, then good for them.
It's a good transition.
It is. But here's what I will say ultimately is that eating real food is what our bodies were designed to do. And there is nothing in a package that is going to mimic real food. Yes. We can try all we want, but it just doesn't work. We will never know what all is in that food. So I'm a big believer, if it doesn't rot, don't eat it. And, right? I mean, if bacteria and fungus aren't good, bacteria and fungus aren't going to grow on it and eat it, then how's it going to assimilate into our bodies, very well? Probably not very well. So, the closer we can get to that, the better. Now, because I still see, and I still see that, I baked this keto bread and, I ate a whole loaf of keto bread and, but it's keto, so it's okay. Well, not really. I mean, can you expand on that?
Well, it definitely, you are addicted to the carbs. You just really are. That's why you can't go more than when you're eating a standard diet, why you can't go more than a couple hours without eating something else. I mean, that's the whole hormonal insulin leptin cycle, roller coaster, actually. So you're addicted to it. And especially when you first start, when you have the habits. When I was 51 when I did this, so I had 50 years of eating 3 meals a day and 4 sides with every meal and snacks and all that stuff. And it's a mental thing as much as it is physical. I mean, it is physical
Right.
to get past that. It takes at least 3 weeks to adapt to a keto diet, and probably a lot more than that, actually. Just the initial adoption is 3 weeks. I would say it takes 6 months or even longer. And then there's the psychological side of it. When I first started, I had decades of low fat in my head. You need to eat low fat and salad and lots of vegetables. And to all of a sudden start eating ribeye steak and butter and coconut oil and all of that and bacon. And it's you for probably the first 6 months, I was cringing every time I ate. I mean, intellectually, I knew it was okay, but it's so ingrained.
Right.
It's hard to get past. And then it took years to get past the multiple things at dinner, multiple sides and all of that. And these days, we never have more than one side. I mean, obviously for a holiday, like we just recently had a family celebration. So we make smoked prime rib, but our smoker is the best thing. So we made smoked prime rib to die for. And then I made smoked Gouda mashed cauliflower and oven roasted Brussels sprouts as the sides, because not everybody is keto carnivore in our family. And then I made creme brulee for dessert, which is just cream and egg yolks. And then I use Swerve, which is erythritol, and stevia for sweeteners. And creme brulees are like this big. It's a small serving. So for a celebration, we'll do that kind of thing. But normally in our nightly meals, we never have more than one side. It's meat and vegetables, or fish and vegetables kind of thing. But it takes a long time to get there. And
Yeah, because we kind of grew
keto
up. Right.
the keto stuff, I had to make everything from scratch. And it's expensive. Almond meal, coconut oil, hazelnut meal, nuts, all that stuff's really expensive. And the keto processed food, keto stuff they have now is also very expensive.
It is.
And it takes a lot of time to do the cooking yourself. So it's a good transition when you're getting away from the standard American diet mentality. Over time, as you eat less sugar, you're not as physically addicted to it,
Right.
and you gradually get past it. It took us a while to get past it.
And
and
let
now
me
we
tell
just
you,
don't.
yeah, I mean, that's a great story. And, thank you for commenting on that. One of the things is that those processed things that you're talking about to make those keto recipes are expensive. And the keto stuff you buy can be expensive. I'll tell you what's not expensive: ground beef and eggs.
Yes.
That is not expensive. Or sausage and eggs. That is not expensive. And
Gotta be careful with sausage, though, because sausage, almost all the commercial sausages have corn syrup in them.
yeah,
So you have
that
to
is
read
true. But if
labels.
you buy, but if you buy your pigs from a farmer and get
Well,
them cut,
yeah,
yeah, there
that's
and
hard to do for a lot of people.
yeah, it might be. It might be. That's how we
Yeah.
buy our beef. That's how we try to buy our pigs, because it's much more convenient when that stuff's in the freezer.
Oh, yeah. We have 2 freezers and 2 fridge freezers, and they are packed, mostly with ribeye right now. But yeah, because our normal meal rotation is ribeye, burger, and salmon. We eat about 3/4 of a pound of salmon a week.
Oh, good
So
for you. Good for you. Get those omega
uh,
3s in.
yeah, and we just like it, and it breaks up the beef. And then we eat bacon and eggs on the weekends.
We eat a lot of bacon and eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us a little bit about your husband's journey. He started keto, and then he had an injury. And tell us about
Yeah.
that.
The injury is actually before. It was a crazy year for us that year. And so I started keto September 5th, and the third week of June, he had a work accident and had his foot crushed. And he had, I think he has plates in his foot to this day. I think 3 of the bones in his foot were broken. He has plates, and then his big toe was almost severed. And he had these 2 long pins coming out his big toe. it was, miserable months. He had to sleep on the couch for, I don't even know how long, because we have a 2-story house, 3 months, 4 months, something like that. It was a very long recovery. I had to have a spreadsheet to keep track of all of his medications, the painkillers, the antibiotics, the anti-inflammatories. It was just crazy. He was so drugged. And then, he had a wheelchair, and then he had a walker, and he then finally graduated to crutches. And our daughter was in basic training for the Air National Guard in Texas at the time, and we flew down there for her graduation. And I empathize so much for disabled people, because getting around in a wheelchair, especially when your foot's sticking straight out and those pins are exposed. Oh my God, I made this plastic thing that Velcroed over that to try and protect it on the airplane and stuff, and in crowds, because we didn't want anybody bumping it. And we were looking for elevators everywhere, and it was just a nightmare. And so we get home, and then we had another wedding in the mountains a couple months later. And then I started keto. So for about 6 months, I was eating something different than he was. And then I was like, you know what? I'm doing all the cooking. You're going to eat what I make. and honestly, he was like, steak, bacon and eggs, butter.
Right.
I'm all in. Yeah. He's like, I'll eat it. Sure. And, and I have to admit, there's an unfair difference between males and females. Sorry, gender folks. Just the amount of muscle men carry and where they carry it, it's much easier for men. And especially when I hit menopause, I struggle way more, even now, because of it. It's just because insulin and leptin, those are all hormones, and they interact with your sex hormones. And when those change, it just makes things more difficult. And he just has an unfair advantage. That's all I can say. So it's been easier for him. But it definitely was part of his recovery. Our lifestyle, if you think of keto, carnivore, it's a very low inflammatory diet. And when you're talking recovering from that kind of a catastrophic injury, inflammation's a big thing. I mean, yeah, inflammation is part of the recovery, but you don't want that excess chronic inflammation on top of that.
Right.
So he was able to, it took 2 years for his foot to fully recover. And that's 18 months of that was keto. So even with keto, it took a long time. But as a result, he has no swelling in his foot. He has no pain in his foot, even with the plates, because we were told that someday he might have to have more surgery to have those removed. They're not an issue. Part of our lifestyle change was being more active. When you, even before you lose a lot of the weight, you have more energy. There's more energy. There's more alertness. You're mentally brighter. I know that a lot of people have success with depression and stuff like that with keto carnivore. I can see why. I definitely feel different mentally and psychologically than I did. And that's part of all of that energy. You want to be outside in the fresh air. You want to go hiking. You don't want to sit around and watch TV and play video games and all that. So as part of all that, I got his butt off the couch and we went for a walk every day. I don't think his physical therapy was as thorough as I would have liked it to have been. I made him get out and walk, and I watched his gait and made sure he didn't favor his foot, because then that creates issues in your knee and your hip and your back and all of that. And let's see, about 9 months after he broke his foot, so 6 months into keto, we started doing country western dancing. We took lessons, and great fun. And dancing is great exercise and social and all those things. And I think that did a lot for his foot to recover too. And we did all that. And of course, now we haven't been dancing for a year because it's all closed, but we go hiking. Birding is my passion. It's like the perfect combination of things. Being out in nature is meditative. You're in sunshine, can never have too much sunshine. Exercise, it's intellectual. You're watching and observing wildlife. and learning about it. It's just great fun. And I can do it anywhere. That's why we go camping.
Right. And, I say this often on our program. And one of our goals as a show is just to educate and empower people that they are in charge of their own health.
Yes.
And you were just talking about it with diet and exercise. Nutrition and exercise, some of the best drugs ever invented.
Yes.
How many
Way
people
more
have?
powerful.
Yeah. How many people are on antidepressants and they have a poor diet?
Yep.
Seriously. And how many of them don't exercise? Exercise is definitely, I believe exercise is the best drug ever invented for exercise, for depression. It stimulates so many neurotransmitters that there's no drug that's ever going to do, especially it's not going to have big side effects. So exercise is amazing.
And they've done studies too about being in nature and in the trees, and sunshine we know is great medicine. So you add all that into the exercise and diet for things like depression, and it's just magic medicine for sure. Yeah. Oh, and the other thing.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, the sunshine, speaking of sunshine, we talked about vitamin D early on. Sunshine stimulates vitamin D, so we shouldn't really be surprised that it makes us happy, right? Vitamin D is known, low vitamin D levels is known to affect, to have an effect on seasonal affective disorder because of low vitamin D. So get out in the sun.
And then critical too to prevent serious illness with things like COVID. Vitamin D is an important part, a critical part of your immune system.
That's been shown over and over again. Vitamin D is so important. If there's one for your immune system, for many other things too, I tell patients all the time, if there's one supplement you can take, it's vitamin D. And make sure you're taking enough vitamin D and vitamin D3 specifically.
Yes. And I'd like to add to that is you're also supposed to take K2 with your vitamin D, so that it goes to your teeth and bones rather than your arteries. That's my understanding.
Yeah. And here's an interesting trivia. And knowing you know a lot of trivia, so you'll probably know this. But do you know the source of K2? How you can get K2 in your diet?
Meat.
Yeah, and do you know what's specific about the meat? It's usually red meat. Do you know what's specific about it? Grass-fed.
Oh,
beef.
Grass-fed, yes.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting to just, I don't know. I guess we probably shouldn't be surprised, but that's where a good source of K2 is.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, grass-fed is expensive. Not everybody can do that. We do grass-fed for our burger because we eat burger with Havarti cheese, and then in the summer we have heirloom tomatoes with it. So when you don't put all that stuff on your burger, you want it to taste good. You want it to be the best burger because you notice the taste. So for burger, we'll do grass-fed, and Sprouts has grass-fed burger for a reasonable price. It's not too much more than regular burger. So we'll do that. But our regular steak and stuff, it's just regular. We just can't afford the huge markup on grass-fed steak.
Yeah, it is, and I think in some ways it's kind of they've just found a market to be able to price it at that. I'm going to guess it gets more popular. The price will probably come down. Shawn Baker on the Joe Rogan podcast made it pretty clear when they asked him about that because he eats grass-fed beef,
right?
But he also said, he said, if you don't worry, if you can't afford it, just go with regular beef. And I will say what we do with our beef, we have it raised and because grass-fed beef is very, very lean too. And I like my carbs kind of fatten us up, right?
Yeah.
So I like my ribeye marbled for sure.
Yeah.
And if you have grass-fed, it won't be marbled as much. So we always have them. I think they feed them grain for the last month
finished.
or so. Yeah, or something like that. So, and we love our freezer full of meat. So
yes.
So let's move on. So speaking of diet and how it affects so many things, you had a cousin that had breast cancer. Can you quickly elaborate on that?
Well, she died when she was 35 years old. Had 4 kids. She was breastfeeding the youngest when she found what she thought was a clogged milk duct, and it turned out to be breast cancer. It turns out that she has the BRCA gene from her dad's side of the family. her dad, I don't think died of cancer, but I think several of his brothers did. And it was just so terribly tragic. But what made me think of it is there's a lot of information that many common cancers are associated with metabolic disease. So you have your heart disease, your diabetes, obesity. They're all part of the same metabolic disease thing caused by high chronic levels of insulin. And the common cancers like breast cancer, prostate cancer stuff are also associated with that. Some things I've read say 80% of it. I mean, a huge percentage. And there's a book out there called The Metabolic Basis of Cancer. Is that what Thomas Seyfried?
Thomas, cancer as a metabolic disease.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And it's one of those really interesting things I came across and started reading about. And there's more information on it now than there was a few years ago when I was reading that. Another kind of side to that is vitamin D in cancer. I know there's a chart floating around of your vitamin D levels and your risk of cancer, a bunch of different cancers in there. And that one's also very interesting. The higher your vitamin D levels, the lower your risk of cancer.
Right. And Dr. Jason Fung has a book too, yes. The Cancer Code. And I guess I guess kind of what you're getting to is, can diet
I forgot to mention she was overweight. And
okay. Yeah.
And that's that connection. So my thought there, and there's no science proving this, I don't think, but my thought there, and I've thought about other things with this, is maybe you have a gene or a genetic propensity towards something like cancer or depression or something like that, but that doesn't get expressed unless unless your environment or your diet causes it. So say you ate a normal ancestral diet from birth, and as a kid and everything growing up, would those genes ever get activated? Because if you look at the studies with hunter-gatherers, even modern hunter-gatherers, they don't have heart disease. They don't have diabetes. I think their cancer incidence is low. So I don't know. There seems to be something to that.
I agree with you. And
I wonder about it.
I think sometimes in the medical system, we use genetics as a cop-out. Oh, well, yes. You've got bad genes. Your mom and dad died of a heart attack when they were young. So, and you've got that same gene. So, here you go. Here's a statin. You better take a statin.
Yep.
And, hope you don't die of a heart attack. Now, here's
high blood pressure, genetic.
The list goes on, right?
Yeah.
But here's what I've got to say about that. We cannot change our genes or our genetics. No. We can't. But we can change the way our genes are expressed. In fact, it's happening all the time in our bodies. Mm-hmm. And the simplest analogy I like to go to is this is with a simple, organism, a bacteria. Bacteria will not express certain genes, i.e. certain resistance to antibiotics, unless they're exposed to those antibiotics. Once they're exposed, those genes start being expressed. Why is our body any different?
Right.
And it's not. So our body expresses different genes depending on what we are exposed to. So if we can take care of our bodies, if we can take care of our diet and our nutrition, exercise, and of course, we haven't talked about it today yet, is sleep. Rest is so important. In fact, I think it trumps all of those. We don't get stronger when we exercise. We don't get stronger when we eat. We get stronger when we sleep and recover. And we sleep more than we eat. We sleep more than we exercise. So if we're not recovering, we're not going to have a strong immune system. And we could break down and get things like cancer or get really sick from COVID. So rest is very important.
Yeah. And sleep, since menopause, sleep has been an issue. I did lots of research about how to get past that. One of the most important things is stop eating at least 3 hours before you go to bed. More is better. eat early. Don't eat some big party meal at 10 o'clock at night. You need to eat, well, we don't always get to do this, but I prefer to eat at like 4 or 5 o'clock. A nice long time for your digestion to do its thing so that you can go to sleep. And because your body has other things to do while you're sleeping besides digesting food.
That's right.
And alcohol, of course, is a huge part of that. If you drink alcohol, you're not going to sleep well. And even early, I find. And I don't drink a lot.
We've talked about that on the podcast a lot. And there's many people that think, well, alcohol relaxes me and helps me sleep. You're right. Yeah, might. It's a CNS depressant. And at first it might make you drowsy.
And then you wake up.
But later on, you wake up 4 hours later when that alcohol wears off and you can't sleep.
Yep, you definitely can.
And we had a podcast. You can look it up on our YouTube, listeners and viewers, on just sleep. Janet and I did a podcast just on sleep. We talked about some of those things. Of course, caffeine late at night. Don't stay away from caffeine, or even in the afternoon. All those, all those tips. So
and caffeine is interesting. So I did my ancestry DNA for genealogy stuff, and found out I am a slow metabolizer of caffeine, which, so way back when, I can say August 2001, because it was right before 9/11, I gave up coffee because I was drinking less and less, and it was making me more and more jittery. So I gave it up cold turkey. Worst 6-week hangover of my life.
Right.
I can now drink a little bit. I can have 1 cup of coffee, and I'm not too bad. But I have to stay away from it almost altogether, let alone late. And I can't have, if it's past noon, I can't have any. I can't even have tea. That's how bad it is.
Wow.
So there are some genetic things you can't avoid. But caffeine.
So Lorraine, we're getting ready to wind our podcast up, and you've already answered it, but I want to be about your passion, but I want you to be more specific about it. So what do you have a passion for?
Oh, birding. It's I got into it because I inherited our dogs from my adult children. Thanks, kids. And I was walking them every day, and this is after keto, so I was already doing a lot of power walking and stuff. But the dogs, they dawdle and do their thing, and I started noticing all these birds, great blue herons and exotic to me birds. I'm like, really? We have those in Colorado? Really? So it just sort of drew me in, and that's about the same time Cornell Labs of Ornithology came out with a website called eBird, and then a short time later they developed an app. And eBird, you can track what you see, and then later on you're able to upload photos and sound recordings, and it hits this human spot of observing nature, which I think is a very human thing, and collecting something. So you collect the birds you've seen. You have a life list, and you can take that. You can have your county list, your state list, your country list, all kinds of things. But it's you're always supposed to keep your mind active by learning new things as you get older, and it's definitely learning new things all over. There are approximately 10,500 birds in the world. I've seen 368 of them.
Wow.
There are about 500 that have been seen in Colorado. So I even have a ways to go in Colorado alone.
Yeah, wow.
But it's a hobby you can do anywhere, at any time. People do lists when they're at the airport or in a city, your backyard, of course. And eBird, you can see what other people have seen and where. So you learn other places to go, not just to bird, but to hike or walk. Landfills are popular because they attract gulls and raptors. So it's just a great all around hobby outside in the sunshine, fresh air, freezing cold sometimes. I just wanted to mention real quick on the sunshine aspect. It's almost more important to drop seed oils rather than carbs, as I've learned from others, because they're high in omega-6, and the ones that you use at home are already oxidized, and then they oxidize further in your body, and that's what makes you burn in the sun. So I found out by accident, actually, and I thought it was keto in general that made me not burn. No, it's the seed oils. And and dermatologists everywhere will cringe, but I have not used sunscreen in over 3 years. and I do not burn. And I obviously am out in the sun for hours and hours every day.
Right.
And the other part of why I'm able to do that is because I get as much sun as possible, even in the winter and spring, is I build up a tan. A tan is Mother Nature's sunscreen. So if you start early when you should be outside all the time, then you have a tan by the time you get to the most intense part of summer in the day. And I literally can be outside for 8 hours and I won't burn.
So Lorraine, how do you've got quite a following on Twitter, and that's how I found you. So how do people get a hold of you if they want to find out more? How do people get a hold of you if they want to find more about you?
Twitter's probably the best, and I don't even know what is my handle on Twitter. You can probably search by my name, Lorraine Lanning.
I think it's Lorraine Lanning is what comes up. Yeah, something like that. Lorraine, thank you so much for sharing your story today. I really, really appreciate it. And you have been listening to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Yes, I know Lorraine talked a little bit about erythritol as a sweetener. We are going to be talking about artificial sweeteners, net carbs, and how to read labels Monday. So with my great brother, who's a research chemist, Shawn Needham, and Tasha, who is a diet coach, we're going to be talking about that Monday, 1 to 2 p.m. You want to tune in for that.